So, you want to learn about how to build and play the adorable, the most endearing looking Gilberta. I personally have pulled Gilberta from even a week ago, and I've already have her buffed by damage output insanely well for some teams. And if you're wondering how you can do the same, what's the best teams for her, and what are the optimal rotations, you're in the right place. Welcome to my complete Gilberta guide, where I'll be breaking down all her basics and include things that you may not have known about. I'll also answer some popular questions like, is Gilberta stronger than Ardelia in terms of buffing damage? Do use the timestamps if you're looking for something specific. And with all that said, let's jump right in and learn about our kawaii girlfriend material with fluffy ears. Just a quick disclaimer, I've referenced different sources from the internet combined with my own testing and experience for this guide. All credits are linked in the description. To start with the conclusion, Gilberta is a support character that applies the highest value of art susceptibility in the game. She can apply nature infliction, and she's able to gather enemies with her skill. The way she can inflict this massive art susceptibility is by simply using her ultimate, which is really easy to do. The susceptibility effect can also be increased based on the number of vulnerability stacks the enemy has, and Gilberta herself is able to apply one of them via her combo skill, which applies the lifted effect. Overall, this makes Gilberta the best supportive damage amplifier in teams that utilizes burst arts damage, like the Avywenna electric nuke team and the Yvonne or last Rite ice teams. Just in case you didn't know, arts damage include heat, electric, cryo, and nature damage, so physical isn't included, which automatically makes Gilberta viable in a lot of teams except for full physical teams at the moment. The arts element teams I mentioned earlier share the similarity of dealing explosive damage in one fell swoop, enough to fully utilize Gilberta's susceptibility that only lasts for a short 5 seconds. Given the short time period and the fact that she can and will apply nature infliction, is not exactly the best character to use in a Laevatain hate team actually. Gilberta's susceptibility doesn't last long enough to cover Laevatain's full ult duration, and not to mention with nature infliction on Gilberta's skill and ult, you might find an issue of your heat infliction stacks being consumed with nature infliction and ultimately prevents Laevatain from converting them into melting flames in a shorter time period. Not exactly the best synergy, though it can still work. Gilberta's gather on her skill actually solves a lot of issues on its own too, mostly for daily farming or exploration. Teams like Last Rite or Avywenna that may miss scattered targets can be gathered together by Gilberta and guarantee an easy nuke so you don't miss any potential damage. And it's one of her best value, especially early game. That means Gilberta's standard gameplay loop will revolve around using her skill first to gather enemies while applying nature infliction, then use her combo to apply the lift effect, which you can trigger her combo by simply inflicting any arts reaction. Then you want to save her ult to make sure you only use it right before your damage dealer is about to output high damage. You also want to make sure she has her ult by the time you want to go into your burst damage window, which means you want to adjust her ult gain efficiency based on your rotations. I'll be covered right under this though, so yeah, bear with me. Just by timing her ult after you completely max out all buffs and debuffs for DPS can mean a world of difference in damage output, which is one of the big tips I have for improving damage output with Gilberta on your team. You want to time her kit. The final point of interest will be with her skills and ult's nature infliction, which provides synergy with a lot of cryo infliction teams since they will be able to trigger the solidification reaction, and applying a physical status after that will trigger shatter, which deals massive physical damage, and it is a viable team archetype, although they may not be the strongest. Finally, it's my personal favorite part about Gilberta. If you dodge twice in a row quickly, you can enter a hover mode for like 2 seconds. Did you know that? Like, holy crap, I didn't know that. It's not that useful for combat, but it's maximum useful for style points. With all that mentioned, let's go through a full kit now. Her ult tier first creates a gravity field that deals 1 hit of nature damage and applies nature infliction. Enemies within this field suffer from the slow effect, which just slows down enemies, and a massive 30% art susceptibility effect if you max upgrade it. If you use this ult while the enemies have active vulnerability stacks, you'll gain extra 3% susceptibility for a total of 33%, and this is the biggest value of art susceptibility at the moment, with one of the most direct conditions required where you just have to use your ultimate. Her skill creates a gravity area that pulls in nearby enemies, dealing nature damage, and at the end of the skill, the area implodes, which deals more nature damage and applies nature infliction. It's important to note it takes a while for the skill to happen first, and then you only get the nature infliction once it ends. So you want to actually use it earlier if you know what to expect, and if you're utilizing arts reaction, you want to make sure the infliction happened first before applying the next infliction so you don't get the whole reaction formula wrong. Again with Gilberta, timing is everything. Next off, with her combo here, it can be triggered when an arts reaction is applied to an enemy. This can usually be done since Gilberta herself already applies nature infliction. All you need is any other arts infliction and you'll trigger it, and usually a lot of teams that uses the arts elements will have some sort of infliction, so you won't have any issues triggering her stuff. Once you do trigger it, she applies lift in a small area, which helps makes them much easier to hit as well. Her first talent here grants all allied guards, casters, and supporters with 7% ult gain efficiency. Do note that this means vanguards, strikers, and defenders defenders cannot receive this effect. You can click on the symbol beside your character's name to find out who is what type of operator. Gilberta's second talent provides a heal based on her intellect stat to the controlled operator if she manages to hit at least 2 enemies with her combo skill or with the last implosion sequence of her battle skill. This is not too important, but it can activate some weapons effect, which, you know, just keep that in mind. Now then, let's just move on to her build. The teams and combo sections is very lengthy, so if you're just here for that, do skip ahead. But yep, to start us off with the best weapons, she will either be using the 5-star stanza memorials or the 6-star delivery guaranteed. Now the reason why both of these are her best is because in terms of buff value, they're actually not too far off each other. But the definitive difference will be that delivery guaranteed provides outgain efficiency, which can be helpful for your rotations. However though, I still do just recommend going for the 5-star stanza because it's much cheaper and accessible, and not only that, you get similar amounts of buff value as compared to the 6-star. Plus, you can also get enough outgain efficiency from just her gears in my experience, especially with artificing, so I wouldn't be that worried. Beyond these two options, going for the 5-star Monai He will be solid just for the outgain efficiency, the 5-star OBJ if you're strictly using her in an electric or heat team, or the 6-star Chivalric Virtues where it provides decent attack buffs, but it can only trigger when you heal, and as I mentioned earlier, Gilberta only heals if her skill or combo hits multiple enemies based on her talent's effect. Just keep that in mind. As for her gears, there are a number of different builds you can go for, but I'll start with the one that gives you the least headache, which is the Eternal Zeronite set and the Bone Crusher armor. All of these gears have the outgain efficiency as main stats, which essentially near guarantees she'll always have her ultimate when you need it with a normal rotation. If you artify some of these gears, it is basically 100% guaranteed, but when you need the ult, you should get it given a normal rotation. There are other builds as well that may include not using any full sets, but using 3 gears with arts intensity and 1 with outgain efficiency instead, just to increase the effects of corrode, but those are for specific teams, and honestly, the builds in this game changes based on your team and what you like to achieve. If you're not too sure, just stick to the general build, it'll work for most teams. As for her upgrade priority, her ult is the most important, with every upgrade increasing susceptibility's value, then go for a skill, followed by her combo, but honestly, her biggest deal is definitely the ultimate. With her kit out the way, let's finally look at her teams and combos. Do follow along if you're interested in some of the teams and would like to learn their rotations. The teams that I will go through will include the Avywenna Electric team, the Laevatain Heat team, the Yvonne Ice team, and the Rite Ice team. This covers every existing arts element that has a team, and it should also cover a lot of teams that you might be considering. However though, do remember, there are still very niche teams or very specific teams that are set up to say one-shot a boss that doesn't need all of these setups. These are the standard teams that work with each other without too much of a hassle of needing to one-shot a boss with specific setups, although I may make another video on that one. In any case, to start us off will be the Yvonne team, which consists of herself, Zaihi, Alesh, and Gilberta. This is a general team that works, but there are options to swap off Alesh for even Rite in a very unique ice team, but more on that team in a future video. This team is one of the best Gilberta teams that makes sense, specifically because of relevant art reactions between Gilberta and the cryo arts. Plus, Yvonne's ult is able to nearly perfectly use up the 5-second Gilberta ult duration. And with that said, let's take a look at the combo that you can do. You want to start by using Zaihi's skill first before even engaging. This is a trick of the trade, and it helps you just regenerate your SP before you even engage. Once you restore it, you go in. Continue with Gilberta's skill for the nature infliction, and then use Yvonne's skill to turn it into solidification. Then use Yvonne's final strike. This is when you'll trigger multiple combos. Use all of them. Zaihi's combo will inflict cryo infliction, which allows Yvonne to use her skill to turn it into solidification again. Then use Zaihi's skill followed by Yvonne's final strike. Repeat it once more and you'll trigger Zaihi's combo, which applies cryo infliction again. Then go for Alesh's ult, which applies another cryo infliction. And here you want to use Yvonne's skill to consume all of the infliction for damage and apply solidification again. Then go for a final strike, which will trigger everyone's combo. Use all of them. This is when you should have maxed out Yvonne's ult. Go ahead and use it. Here you actually want to time your Gilberta ult. The moment you see Yvonne do this spin, then you use Gilberta's ult. The simple reason being, Yvonne's ult actually goes for 7 seconds, and the longer you attack, the more buffs and damage you gain. So the ideal scenario here is for Yvonne to shoot for 2 seconds, then at the time where she has the higher buff amounts, get Gilberta's susceptibility to be applied, and blast off for the last 5 seconds, where she enjoys every benefit and fall. And that is the standard idea of playing this ice team with Gilberta. The main mechanic is honestly with how Yvonne is able to convert cryo and nature infliction to solidification to get more combos to activate, and end with her ult with the most buffs from Gilberta applied. Do note that there are a lot of alternative choices and alternative rotations as well based on your team and the goal of your team. This team is something general that works in most scenarios, not quite a hyper speed nuke or like a AoE specific team. And yep, next up, let's just move on to my favorite team, which will be the Avywenna electric team. This is, in my opinion, either the most perfect team or the second most perfect team for Gilberta, although it may not be the strongest. The logic here is simple. You want to get as many Thunder Lances from Avywenna's combo and ult to be on field and deal damage by retrieving all lances at once. Before you retrieve everything, that is when you want to apply everything you can with Gilberta, and here's a list of it. You want to make sure you land her combo's lift effect first, then land her ult susceptibility. In the meantime, try to land corrosion by applying nature inflictions to enemies with other inflictions. For this team, you will always have electric infliction almost all the time, so you should be able to get corrosion without an issue. But yeah, you see, corrosion is able to reduce an enemy's elemental resistance, which is actually one of the rarest multipliers, and you want to apply it if you can. Now then, let's jump into the team. It will be Avywenna, Perlika, Akekuri, and Gilberta. This team will deal the highest damage for Avywenna, but if you swap out Akekuri for Arknight, she will instead provide you with better SP recovery, easier ult energy gain with constant combo triggers, but less damage overall. And here we have the combo. Start with Perlika's skill, then Avywenna's final strike, which triggers her combo to throw down 3 lances. Trigger every combo that appears, repeat this until you have a lot of Thunder Lances on field, and gain every ultimate. Don't use any of them unless you want to start dealing massive damage. Once you have all your ults, start with Gilberta's ult. Under normal circumstances, this also applies corrosion since you will very constantly apply electric infliction. If not though, use Perlika's skill first beforehand. After that, use Avywenna's ult followed by Perlika's ult, then Akekuri's ult for the link buff, and now you have officially maxed every buffs and debuffs. Use Avywenna's skill to see nuclear damage as you retrieve all those lances on the field. The trick to maximizing more damage with this team, I've covered in this video. Check it out, it's a good video. But the gist of things is that you want to maximize the Thunder Lances on the field. You can do that by using Avy's combo and ult, and Avy's combo does have a cooldown that you can see by this loading bar below her icon. A good strat here is to animation cancel your final strike by evading if your combo is nearly available, like you see on screen here. Once your combo is online, let it rip. While the enemy has electric infliction, you'll be able to trigger a combo and you don't gotta start from your first hit with Avywenna again. This team has very high damage per screenshot, but in reality, it's not exactly the highest damaging team over time, mainly due to the lack of a true 6-star electric carry. Avywenna is dishing out what a very good 5-star would dish out though, but it's not exactly just outpacing what a Laevatain could. And speaking of Laevatain, let's take a look at Laevatain's team now, which is where I'll also answer the question of, is Ardelia better than Gilberta or the other way around? Well, the easy answer is they're both good in different places, right? Firstly, the team we'll cover for this Heat team is Laevatain, Wolfguard, Akekuri, and Gilberta. This team can still work, but there are some pros and cons. Firstly, Gilberta's nature infliction may consume heat inflictions on enemies. While yes, you get corrosion, but you lose the heat infliction that Laevatain would need to gain melting flames. This isn't as big of a deal if you know when to inflict the correct reactions and saving enough SP to manage everything well. But what is a bigger deal is Laevatain has a lengthy 15-second ult that constantly dish out high damage. Gilberta's 5-second susceptibility duration isn't quite long enough to maximize the benefits. Now, this actually won't be a problem if you can beat the boss in 5 seconds, which there are people who do that, and it's also one of the big differences between Gilberta and Ardelia. Gilberta has a 5-second window, and it's a really high value 5 seconds. If you can nuke them, Gilberta is just going to be really valuable. Ardelia has a way lengthier susceptibility, which is why Ardelia is more preferred here since she can cover Laevatain's entire ult duration fully, where Ardelia's skill can apply the art susceptibility effect that lasts for a while, 30 seconds. And again, it's less susceptibility compared to the 5-second Gilberta ones, but it's 6 times longer. However though, you do have to consume a corrosion and an SP for you to apply this effect, but it doesn't just come for free. Not to mention, Ardelia doesn't have any arts infliction to her name, so you won't worry about consuming heat infliction out of nowhere and leave Laevatain dry with no melting flames. She does in fact apply corrosion right away. There's no reactions needed, no inflictions needed. For all that reason, Ardelia is better than Gilberta in this team for most people, but Gilberta is better than Ardelia for specific burst damage teams that explodes enemies within 5 seconds. There are actually some that you would still prefer Ardelia, but you know, in the end, the main point is they're both good in different scenarios. And the best part is they are almost always going to be interchangeable with each other. So for this team, if your Laevatain's good enough, just explode your enemies within 5 seconds. That would mean Gilberta is a better value than Ardelia in my opinion. Now, Gilberta will truly be absolutely better than Ardelia when you take into account her AoE gather effect and if you're fighting multiple enemies. You see, with Gilberta's gather, you can just inflict heat infliction way easier to multiple enemies with a singular skill, because your heat infliction skill would just just hit like 5 enemies. In any case, here's a combo that takes advantage of everything while avoiding screwing up your art's reactions. You want to start with Gilberta's skill, which gathers the enemies, and wait for the nature infliction to happen. Once you do, trigger Wolfguard's combo. That applies heat infliction. Because of a reaction, it will then turn into combustion. Given a combustion, that will trigger Gilberta's and Laevatain's combo. Laevatain's combo gains her 1 melting flame, and the enemies are also lifted. This is where you do Akikuri's skill for another heat infliction, and if you're able to gather a bunch of enemies together, you might be able to have multiple heat infliction done right here. Laevatain will then do her final strikes if you're fighting multiple enemies, and you get instantly max melting flames, which is when you can fire up your enhanced skill. Repeat the cycle if you don't have the ultimate, use your ult when you do have it, and upon ulting, spam Laevatain's skill until you trigger Wolfguard's combo. Then use Gilberta's ult. The combination of the infliction will apply corrosion. This is when you can use Laevatain's combo. Then after that, spam final strikes with Laevatain, use your enhanced skill when it's available, and unfortunately you won't be able to fit too much more into the rotation since Gilberta's ult duration is not long, but if you can beat your enemies within that short time frame, you're good. Let's say if you can have a max melting flame skill to be done within this 5-second window and one-shots the whole wave, then that's absolutely valid. This is the scenario against multiple enemies, which is the best case scenario for this team, and if it's against a single boss, it is much more recommended to go with Ardelia instead for the easy corrosion infliction that instantly triggers Laevatain's combo without wasting any heat infliction. You can still use Gilberta, it's just going to take more time to get enough heat infliction, considering you don't really have a way to instantly trigger corrosion without wasting a heat infliction stack to spend it on a reaction, right? But in the end, that's not a terrible team at all, and it'll work out. With a heat team out the way, let's take a look at the Last Rite Ice team. The team will consist of Last Rite, Zaihi, Estella, and Gilberta. This is a standard Last Rite team only for general scenarios. It works fine against single target, but will also allow you to burst through some AoE scenarios much easier, something Last Rite does struggle with. I will add this again, there are multiple different teams for Last Rite, especially setups that is designed to one-shot bosses. Those are a completely different beast and they take different setups, and the investment involved will be really much higher. But I will be covering all of that in future showcases and videos, so drop a follow if you like. Coming back to this team, it's interesting where Gilberta can and has to inflict nature infliction on an ultimate and skill, and that may cause you to again consume cryo infliction for a reaction. Since Last Rite's entire gimmick is to have high cryo infliction in order to trigger her combo, you may lose your cryo infliction if you mistakenly use Gilberta's ult or skill too early, and that will be detrimental to Last Rite's damage output. You gotta remember, the more cryo infliction with Last Rite, the higher her combo skill damage would be. This is why the better team for those single target boss speed clears with Last Rite usually run Ardelia with potential 1, although her susceptibility is still slightly lower than Gilberta, but Ardelia does not interfere or react with the cryo inflictions. So what happens is you get the best of everything, right? You maximize the damage, you don't get rid of the cryo infliction, you also don't have to hold back, and you're covering the entirety of Last Rite's damage output. But that is for a speed clear that is designed to one-shot stuff. In any case, here's a general combo for your Last Rite fans out there that wants to utilize Gilberta to especially help her in daily explorations or dungeons. And yes, you can still use this against a boss fight, but it's my personal opinion though that I would rather just use a Last Rite one-shot duke team for bosses. However, that's kind of just for fun, right? For a general standard combo, it'll start like this. Use Zaihi and Last Rite skills before entering combat, because again, you'll just regain the SP for free, and the effects of their skills will stay. Then start with Gilberta's skill. While you do this, spam basics with Last Rite. Gilberta's skill will apply nature infliction, and Last Rite will inflict cryo infliction after to achieve the solidification effect. Upon getting that, Estella's combo will activate, which applies a physical status on solidified enemies and hence achieve the shatter effect for damage. After that, use Last Rite's skill, followed by one final strike. Repeat that twice and end with Estella's skill. That will apply at least 3 cryo inflictions and trigger Last Rite's combo. This will be sufficient to kill off most mobs in AoE scenarios, and from there, ult with Gilberta right before ulting with Last Rite. That will be the most damage output, and you can technically use the same team for single target scenarios or AoE scenarios, but do note that this isn't the type of nuke team again that aims to end the boss with one combo into an ult. It's more a balanced team that's able to handle multiple scenarios without you having to think way too much, and Gilberta is able to maximize the Last Rite ult damage. That's one of her biggest damage output ever. And with all that out the way, it's finally time to look at her potentials. The highest value for money is potential 2, where you can gain additional vulnerability and increase multipliers of the art's susceptibility based on the stacks of vulnerability. If it's too much fluff, that means a good 6 to 10% damage increase overall, and the rest of her potentials are mostly quality of life stuff or ult gain efficiency related improvements. They do not increase her buffing abilities, but depending on the type of team rotations you're trying to go for, some of these potentials may help massively. For the general public though, P2 should be sufficient. Or P0. Actually, P0 is more than enough. As a conclusion, Gilberta is a strong damage amplifier, with one of her main purpose being gathering enemies to ease most teams and players' experience in fighting multiple enemies. Very helpful for early game. And even then, she has enough intricacies and depth to work with teams in endgame, utilizing art's infliction and reactions to her advantage, while maximizing damage with timing your ults and combo. I think she's a worthy pull, especially if you want to play Yvonne or Avywenna, but then again, Ardelia can still do enough to be a replacement, or even be better in some cases, like fully enveloping Laevatain's ult duration. However, if you consider future characters though, her value may change, and it's in my personal advice to prioritize general buffers that benefits multiple teams, since they usually are versatile and has less risk of just suddenly being unusable. But do remember, pull for who you like. That should be the greatest advice, and I gosh dang like my shaking wiggly fox. And that'll be all for this Gilberta guide. It is now probably 5 AM by the time I finish this. All I ask is for a cool little sub, and maybe a like, and maybe a comment, maybe just a bell button, maybe your house. Yeah, also click this, I guess. YouTube thinks you'll like it.